Hey, Industrial Talk is brought to you by Cap Logistics. You want to minimize downtime? Absolutely. Increase reliability? You bet. Ensure operational profitability? Yes, you do. That means you need 24/7, 365 insights into your supply chain. Look no further. Cap Logistics. Go to caplogistics.com or just call them. They're great people. 800-227-2471. And AI Dash. Now, we all know about satellites. Yep, they're up in the air and they're looking down. How about AI Dash combining AI technology to be able to give us greater insights into our vegetation management, into hazards that exist out there in our industrial space? Yeah, that's powerful. That's tactical. That is insightful. That's AI Dash. Go out to AI-.com. Find out more. They're doing great things in the world of AI.
Welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast with Scott McKenzie. Scott is a passionate industry professional dedicated to transferring cutting-edge, industry-focused innovations and trends while highlighting the men and women who keep the world moving. So put on your hard hat, grab your work boots, and let's go.
All right, once again, thank you very much for joining Industrial Talk, the number one place that celebrates you, the industrial heroes all around the world. You know why we celebrate you? Yeah, you got to ask that question. Why we celebrate you here on Industrial Talk is because you are bold, you're brave, you dare greatly. Absolutely. You're solving problems. You're changing lives in a positive way. You're changing communities. And of course, you're changing the world. That's why this platform is here for you. It's a celebration. All right, hot seat time. The gentleman's name is Alok Aggarwal. Now, he is the CEO and was a chief data scientist at Scry Analytics. That's SCRY. And this is an important topic, and you know it is. It's not out of reach. We've got to talk about AI, machine learning, and of course, predictive analytics. That's what Alok brings to this particular conversation. Let's get cracking. Yeah, let's get cracking. You ever talk to somebody and you realize, wow, I don't know a fraction of what that individual's talking about? Now, Alok does a great job. He brings the history that is around AI, machine learning, the history, which I'm passionate about. How did we get here? You always got to look at the history, and of course, Alok brings all of that. But it was just, you're going to enjoy this particular conversation, all right? You just are, because he brings the lumber and the truth, and it's just a great conversation, and hopefully we'll do more. All right, so I'm out walking the dog, because that's what I do every morning. My dog keeps me young. So I'm out walking the dog, and I always think, and I'm thinking about things. This time I'm thinking about all of the, I guess, blogs or white papers or articles that exist out there today. It's it's a lot, right? And in all of those are, if you look at them, you stack them all up, right? There's just tremendous solutions, tremendous wisdom, tremendous insights, all buried in there. But they're buried. They're deep in the bowels of these blogs and white paper. And I was thinking, if you're doing, and I don't mean to be provocative. Yeah, I do a little bit, but let's just say I have a certain thought about all of these blogs and these white papers, because I think we're at a point where I know that I'm inundated by just information coming out of that terminal. It's like hitting me right in the face, and it's all this other information, and I'm just me. I wish I was a computer, because I would soak it all up, but I'm not, right? And it's hard to consume it. So I think that there has to be a shift, because right now I don't think people, maybe a few, maybe if I'm dedicated to a specific location, I'll read the articles. But I know that for me, I'm being changed from the DNA out, right? And I'm one that likes to see it. be entertained, talked about it. And I think a lot more people are doing that as we speak. So with that said, walking the dog, and I came to the conclusion that wouldn't it be great to dust off these blogs, white papers, whatever, repurpose them into a real human-centric conversation, record it, look at it. So the format would be, hey, you wrote this article. You got street cred, man. You've got that thought leadership going on. There's the article. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the key points. It's sort of the Cliff Note version, but at least it gets to it. And then if the listener, because that's easy, right? I don't have to pick anything. All I have to do is just sort of listen. If I'm the listener, I don't have any friction. I could go back and say, I want to read that article. I want to get that, or I want to, whatever action, call to action there is. So I really would like you and others to think about how you can repurpose these wonderful, absolutely brilliant articles or blogs or reports or white papers and repurpose them into a conversation. And no matter how you do that, that would be great. It'd be great on the Industrial Talk podcast. But the reality is, if the Industrial Talk is here specifically to educate, okay, and to collaborate and to innovate and all of the things that are happening within industry, that has to be a part of it. And we have to get that message out. This idea that the article, well, somebody might find it or whatever it might be, or we'll send it into an email marketing campaign, whatever it might be. We're just inundated. So we, industry, have to really think about how we repurpose those rich content, insight-driven reports and blogs, but repurpose them. Figure out how to do that. And come on the Industrial Talk podcast, because I'll definitely, that makes me want to read them and makes me want to talk about it and makes me want to share as much as I possibly can, because the listeners and industry as a whole, we got to keep on learning. We got to keep on growing. All right. So I met Alok in California. Again, he's smarter than me, which is, Alok, don't be offended by it, but that's not a really hard bar, but you're smarter than me. And what you'll gain for this particular conversation is the fact that you'll see him and his passion and his desire to be able to utilize data in a way that is predictive, learning, and all of the stuff that's associated with that, and be able to help us in the world of industry, in the world of manufacturing, in the world of utilities, you name it, help us do our jobs better. And Alok is just an absolute delight. Enjoy the conversation with my friend and now your friend, Alok. All right, Alok, welcome to Industrial Talk. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited about having this conversation. I mean, you bring a wealth of knowledge, but instead of me telling the listeners the wealth of knowledge, your stat card's impressive out on LinkedIn. Give us a little background, a little 411 on who Alok is.
So thank you. I did my PhD in computer science from Johns Hopkins in 1984, which included algorithms, part of basics of machine learning, computer vision, something called computational geometry, which is goes as the basics. Joined IBM Watson Research Center, which is about 40 miles north of New York City. Worked for them for 16 years during this period. Taught at MIT for a year. Came back. We used actually machine learning in 1991 to 95 timeframe for improving paper mills, steel mills. So actually put it in practice during that period. There were no open source, so we actually wrote our own algorithms. Wow. Then became the director of strategy, and after that started their IBM India Research Laboratory to 30 PhDs, 30 masters during 1998 and 2000. Then I quit to start another company called Evaluserve, which has not much to do with AI or machine learning. The co-founder is still running it. We started essentially in January 2001, December 2000. It's about 3,500 people worldwide. But I wanted to go back to my roots and started Scry Analytics in 2014, in February 2014. Basically, doing a machine learning, AI, and building products and what we call enterprise software apps. We have built about 26 software apps. Scry, the word itself, is an interesting word. It means you can use it in Scrabble. You can actually
it's a powerful one. I kept on screwing it up, but now I know it's Scry.
Yeah, you can convert cry to Scry and Scrabble, and people will be looking at you, especially your wives and kids, that you've gone crazy. But it means crystal ball gazing or fortune telling. So Nostradamus is considered the biggest scryer. And since we're doing a lot of predictive analytics, we are essentially predicting the fortune, misfortune of companies, individuals, entities, and so on. And hence the word scry. The company is based on a thesis that actually, unlike the thesis of 1950s in AI, the hype and the bust, which was they will create a general purpose AI machine, often called artificial general intelligence, which HAL 9000 was portrayed as in Odyssey 2001 Space Odyssey, where one of the founders, one of the advisors to Space Odyssey 2001 Space Odyssey was Marvin Minsky, was one of the actually considered as one of the three fathers of AI. This was kind of his imagination of HAL 9000 as the artificial general intelligence computer. And those of you who would have seen it would understand what he was talking about. The hype went bust in 1977, and one of the other fathers of AI, McCarthy, one of the New York Times reporter asked him in 1977, so what do you think of artificial general intelligence? When do you think it will actually happen? The hype had gone bust, and he said very nicely, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 500 years, what we need is 1.7 Einsteins and 0.3 Manhattan projects. For those of you who may recall, Manhattan Project was the one which basically helped US create atom bomb to end the Second World War. For better or worse, I mean, that was what Manhattan Project was. So this time around, our thesis is that there will be a Cambrian explosion of AI apps, very much like what happened with pumps and motors after the Industrial Revolution. Today, motors are pervasive. In fact, in my room, there are at least 3 motors running, one in a fan.
I have to interrupt. When you said we had this conversation a couple of days ago, and I didn't follow up on it. When you said you got a couple of motors in your room, of course, you got to know where I'm going. I'm just sort of thinking motor. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, you have a motor in a fan, right? You have a motor in your PC, you have a motor in your laptop. So you have 3 motors running, right? I mean, we don't even think about it.
No.
That's what the whole point is, right? What do you mean by that? We have motors running. Yes, there are 3 motors running. And that is what will happen according to our thesis in 2035. There'll be 1 million different apps running all over the world, which will be commercialized, which will actually be providing useful the utility, useful KPIs, reduce costs, reduce energy, and so on. So with that as the thesis, we decided in 2014 that we'll create a bunch of apps. To be more precise, 24 apps, and we are pretty much there, and we're now selling them. And working with some of the top tier firms, providing them very high-end services and selling our products or what we call enterprise applications, because they all work with using APIs so that the people do not have to destroy their current solution. They can just plug it in, and that's why that's why they are called apps.
So what industry do you tip at Scry? What industry do you normally focus in on?
So 2 industries we are very big on. One is related to financial services, particularly banks. We're gradually going into insurance also. Banks, asset managers are our biggest industry, so to speak. Second is related to IoT, particularly industrial supply chain management, smart cities. That's all where IoT gets used. In fact, one product is quite horizontal, called Collatio, which comes Latin word for collation and putting together. It's putting together a diverse set of data sets, which is sold. We are selling to banks for mortgage operations, for small, medium business lending, for KYC, know your customer, and ID checks and verification for onboarding, etc. The second one is called consentio, again a Latin word for consensus or concordance or harmony. And that is all related to enterprise apps related to IoT, smart cities, and so on. So those are the two big ones. And then, of course, technology, telecom ends up using quite a bit of IoT. So we will gradually, we're already selling to a few companies in technology and telecom, but we'll probably sell much more.
Are you considering the IoT solution, the app, in a manufacturing type of environment?
We are already selling it to manufacturing environments. So in particular, one of the very important apps which people often forget in IoT world is that the devices or sensors may actually go bad. So the data coming in itself may not be good. And if the incoming data is bad, then obviously all the analytics that will be done will be bad. So one of the subproducts of Consentio is called IoT Doctor, and basically it is for the checking the health of the sensors and devices. Because sometimes these sensors and devices may go bad themselves. For example, unfortunately, somebody lights a cigarette close to a sensor, the temperature will go up, the smoke will go up, carbon dioxide will increase, and if these are some of the things that the sensor is measuring or the device is measuring, obviously it will have a spike. Similarly, maybe there is a pipe in a manufacturing plant which is emitting steam just to let the pressure off every 2 minutes. Then during that period, the device which is close by could have strange readings. The other part where sensors and devices may not go bad, but where they may not be able to communicate effectively with the cellular station is because of weather and so on. So many things cause that. And that's the first thing that you want to make sure is that the data is at least 95% correct.
That's interesting because I never really thought about it. There's been a plethora of IoT, the conversation, IIoT, everything that's going out there, putting the devices out on these assets, all of that. Fantastic. Fine. Yeah. Digital transformation. Got it. But I've never really spoken to anybody that talks about, hey, the device eventually could fail, right?
Yeah, the device could fail. The battery could go down. A simple failure as the battery goes down, right? But the device could fail in many, many different ways. I mean, we know all the equipment fails sooner or later. So how do you know it hasn't failed? And it may fail temporarily or permanently.
And see, you're compressing that time, right? You might. And that's where the AI solution is to say, hey, we got a problem, compress the time, somebody goes out, replaces it, does whatever it has to do, and affect the change quicker. Which is
exactly. And if it's a smart water meter, for example, I mean, San Jose Water Company doesn't have to go out. They can just tell me, hey, Alok, can you please do us a favor? This is where the battery goes. Can you please put it in? Because it's good for you. It is good for us. It's good for you because if you have a burst or a leak in your pipe, our smart water meter will immediately tell you as an alert, that's what has happening. It's good for us because we're getting data in real time using the cellular device.
Yeah. And when we start talking about APIs, right, you don't have really any limitations. APIs allow you to take your apps and be able to plug and play to a certain extent.
And that's the reason why we call them enterprise apps. I mean, it's very much like, I would say a smartphone app, an iPhone app, but the difference is that these are for enterprises, not for individuals. And you can literally plug in there and get going in a matter of a day or two with the whole new process.
And from my perspective, what are we talking about from an ROI perspective? What are we looking at an expensive solution or something that is economically viable moving forward?
So these things are extremely economically viable for two reasons. One is what I would call Moore's law, which basically Gordon Moore, who was the founder of Intel in 1965, hypothesized that the price of semiconductors will go half in 2 years, or the number of semiconductors on the chip will double every 2 years, which would, and I mean, this is an exponential thing, right? If it implies that in 20 years, the price will go 2 to the 10 times, the number of chips, or semiconductors, which is 1,000 times. And of course, we have now been in this game for almost 60 years. So it's not surprising that it has gone up at least a million or 10 million times, if not a billion times. So this obviously reduces the price of computation, reduces the price of devices substantially. The second reason why these things are also quite inexpensive is there is a lot of open source software. So I was talking about 1991 to 1995, which is when we had to build our own machine learning algorithms and code them. The algorithms were there. We had to code them, right? So everyone had to code their own algorithms. There was no open source, which was literally free of cost, where you can start from literally not from ground zero, but probably from cloud 2 going up. So all of this has made the systems quite inexpensive. I mean, even for industrial systems where we sell a platform or the product together, for IoT Doctor, it starts as low as $30,000 for a year for a small manufacturing plant. I mean, that's $2,500 a month, roughly 1/3 or 1/4 the cost of the operator who is running it.
And see, what's interesting, what you're talking about, it is constantly being driven down because as greater adoption happens, right? More people are going to say, yeah, I need it. And that whole juggernaut that wants to move forward definitely will continue to drive down the prices.
Absolutely. And open source will continue to drive down the prices. And I mean, if we look 15 years ahead, not 5 years, quantum computing will be the next thing, which will be after Moore's law, because Moore's law is saturating out. But that will begin to drive down the prices because you can do much more computing using quantum computers. So I think there is a lot positive that's going on for the humanity worldwide, because suddenly it's not only US or Canada or OECD countries that can use it. I mean, countries like India and China, and China, okay, you can say they're still much better, but India and other poorer countries are full-time using it.
See, that's a beautiful thing, Alok. That's transformative, and that's not out of the reach of small companies, big companies. It doesn't really matter. It is truly transformative, and we better the world as a result of that. And I
exactly.
I see it, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one example, which is very, very interesting. There is a company which has set up a $2 billion plant in India, which is going to create 2 million electric-powered scooters. Now, India is a pretty dense place. I mean, scooters, motorcycles are used all the time. And these will be all electric-powered scooters. By 2025, if they continue on the path, the gasoline-powered scooters will be and motorcycles will be all gone or literally replaced. And all of this is happening. If you look at it, it is all comes down to the ability of Moore's law and ability to produce things much cheaper and better, both hardware and software.
So that's pretty cool. Come on, I mean, listeners, you gotta sort of sit back and say, yeah, the future's pretty doggone cool. I like it. Now, you had me. It's all cool. The conversation that we're having right now is really bitching. Now, what's the big problem? What is that? This is all great, but there's always roadblocks. What is it?
Yeah, exactly. All hypes eventually hit against a wall, right? I'm sure the three founders or the fathers of AI, Turing, McCarthy, and Minsky, are turning in their graves and saying, what did we do wrong? Because their hype hit the wall in 1975.
It is super hype.
We are on a course where this hype could also, it won't go bust. Even the previous hype had a lot of positives. We wouldn't be working on where we are working if it weren't for that hype. So I'm a very big believer that hypes have very positive things to do for the society. For example, people think deep learning networks came recently. Soviets, as part of that hype in 1965, Ivahenko in Soviet Union, now in Russia, actually already created an 8-layer deep learning network. With his student Lapa, they already gave an algorithm in 1970 how to train such a network. Now, why were they not able to do it? Again, comes down to the price of semiconductors and the price of these, right? It was so expensive. In 1975, if you had to create 86 billion neurons, artificial neurons, which exist in a typical human, it would have cost the entire GDP of United States, which was $3 trillion. Right? So that's why that hype fell apart. Now, what is going to slow down this hype, or which we'll need to think through how to break through that barrier, is that as these machines, the more we train them and the more accurate they become, they rely on more and more variables or parameters, as we call them. And to train on those parameters, you need much bigger deep learning networks. And therefore, you need much more electricity, because eventually it comes down to servers. So some of these things, I mean, we are already seeing in Bitcoin is a very good example, where you have a blockchain and it basically ruined one of the cities close to Quebec completely, because miners went there. The city said, okay, we'll give you electricity for rather cheap rates. All miners went there, and literally they had to raise their rates after a few years because they did not have electricity to give to the locals. China had the same problem. They also realized, oh my God, because a lot of these miners in Bitcoin were working in China, and they suddenly realized, oh my God, we're now creating electricity from fossil fuels, and here we go. So that's one example, but one can argue that's a standalone example. But I'll give you another example, GPT-3, which is in natural language processing, natural language generation. These guys actually trained it. They spent about $4 million that we know of. I mean, we don't know the exact numbers. They trained it for such a long time. The amount of electricity that was used was so much that they actually made a small mistake in their algorithm. And they said that we didn't want to retrain it because it would have been just too expensive, both time-wise, money-wise, and electricity-wise, etc. I mean, in parentheses, they did not say it out loud, but that was. So here are some of the examples. I mean, Google never tells us as to how much it is training, but our estimate is that it is training for their Google ads and what they're using at least 2 to 4 billion variables, which means they have a farm which is running easily in 100 million servers or thereabouts. Now imagine how much electricity that's going to take. So you have a climate change where AI can be very helpful. You have a place where, just like motors and pumps which use energy, you will have AI motors and pumps equivalent which are using energy.
See, this is so interesting, because I remember that all of a sudden, a few years ago, and somebody says, hey, just store it in the cloud. And of course, that's a learning curve for me. I'm going, what the heck does that mean, right? Store it in the cloud. And then all of a sudden, everything is in the cloud. And then I'm just thinking to myself, who the heck is providing the power for all of this? And the size must be just absolutely insane. Because, every time I take a picture, cloud, boom, 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 video, cloud. Everything's in the cloud.
And that's where a lot of innovation will have to be done. I mean, again, some of the good news is that in theoretical computer science, in math, in physics, some of this has been going on. That's why I'm a very big proponent of basics, theoretical work, basic sciences. Like, how do you cool these machines? What do you do? Okay, when you cool these machines, you have hot water. Can you recirculate this hot water? How do you get all this energy, electricity? I mean, wouldn't be surprising if this continues, if the world requirement for energy for AI machines will already exceed that used by all air conditioners in the world. So there we have it. I mean, we'll have an interesting cycle where hype will hit reality.
Yeah, because you're sitting there, you're pulling on the thread. You go, hey, this is great, this is great, this is great. And then all of a sudden, somebody's like that story you told us about that learning, and they made a problem with the code. They're not going back. It's like, can you imagine sitting around and saying, darn it.
I mean, very honestly, because we do a lot of research and advanced development in Scry, one of our PhDs, he came to me and I said, hey, he said, look, we made a small error here. And I said, why don't you train it? He says, Alok, really, you want me to train it for this small error? It will take me 2.5 weeks. I don't know whether the small error is worth fixing at this point of time.
Wow.
So this is already happening with us. I mean, imagine you multiply that 1 million times, 10 million times, and particularly, cities, giga cities like NEOM and other giga cities coming up, which are smart cities, where this is what they will be based on. And you suddenly say, yes, the good news is NEOM as a smart city is in the desert. They get sun all the time, but they better use that sun very efficiently and very cheaply or inexpensively to produce all this electricity.
It's true. And then there's the physical characteristics of power. And there's the force. There's things that are just a part of power that keep a community. Like I look at the lights here, and there's just, it's power that's pushing and keeps it stable. There's a force there, you know. I mean, these are difficult questions. Problems.
These are interesting questions. I mean, that's exactly how interesting paradigms get created, how hypes get created, how they hit the wall. And it's no different than what happened with physics, right? I mean, we hit the wall before Newton came around. Newton gave Newtonian mechanics, and that continued for a few years, for a couple of centuries, hit the wall again, then Einstein came around. So it's all up and down, but the overall curve is on the positive direction.
And I got to tell you that you're the first one that really addressed the fact that this is all great, but it requires power. It requires energy to do this, right? Whatever this is, it requires, and it's hot, so it requires a lot of power. And as you continue to scale, more and more and more, and so we wrestle with, we want a sustainable future and use sustainable and renewable type power, and yet we want this innovation too, and it's a balance. I mean, I'm glad you're smart and I'm not.
No, but I think, look, the same thing happened in the Industrial Revolution. That time, of course, we were unaware of its effects on climate, but we all realized that it required fossil fuel and energy to run pumps and motors, engines, and all that good stuff. Yeah. I mean, these are the new pumps, motors, and engines, which are, I mean, in some sense, you can say they're software, but they're still running on a hardware underneath, which still requires energy, which still requires cooling.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does. Yeah, I'm going to tell you, it's like that. You know, you had the Industrial Revolution, and then we're always talking about all the industrial, and now we're at 4.0, right? And it's a energy centric type of solution. Great thinking, great minds, gotta have it, gotta have that energy, some way, shape, or form. Brilliant. We got to wrap this up, Alok. It's over my time limit. Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thanks for again having me. I mean, I love to be part of whatever you folks are doing because you're great. I mean, absolutely.
It's exciting times out there, and you're leading the way. And I could geek out on this stuff all day long and talk to people who go, "Oh my gosh, that's cool. And for me, it's hard to sort of maintain my composure. Get all excited. How do people get a hold of you, Alok? What's the best way?
I think email is the best. My first name dot last name at scryanalytics.com. I would say that is, I actually respond much faster and quicker to email than to my WhatsApp or text messages.
Yeah, you're good at that. I have to admit, you're very good at that. By the way, Scry, SCRY. So you listeners out there, Scry Analytics. Alok, how do you say your last name?
Aggarwal. I mean, if my parents knew how to pronounce these things properly in English, they would have used U rather than A. So it should have been UGRAWAL, but Alok Aggarwal.
Yeah, you got to reach out to him. Yeah, listeners, you're not going to be disappointed. You got a lot of passion, man. I like it.
Thank you.
All right, listeners, we're going to have to wrap it up on the other side. Fear not. You're going to have all the contact information for my friend Alok and anything else and don't come to me and say, Scott, I can't get a hold of Alok, because he is responsive. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Really enjoyed it.
Cheers there, my friend. Stay tuned, listeners. We'll wrap it up on the other side.
You're listening to the Industrial Talk Podcast Network.
All right, once again, thank you very much for joining Industrial Talk and celebrating industrial heroes and learning from the very best in industry. Thank you to Alok for being on Industrial Talk. You go reach out to his stat card out on LinkedIn. I'm telling you, will not be disappointed. Scry Analytics, S-C-R-Y Analytics is the company. Come on, face it. You need trusted individuals that know what they're talking about in the world of AI, ML, and, of course, predictive analytics. Alok. All right, I'm going to challenge you. You're going to look at those blogs. You're going to look at those white papers. You're going to say to yourself, how can I repurpose them? And I'm telling you right now, you give it a human component. Talk about it. Interact. Bring those articles. Bring those things to life. That's what I'm talking about. Go out to Industrial Talk. Always find out more from the great people in industry. Industrial Talk is where it's at. Be bold. Be brave. Dare greatly. Hang out with Alok. You're going to change the world. Thank you very much again. We're going to have another great interview right around the corner.